Harley-Davidson dealerships are closing everywhere across America: San Francisco, Kewanee, Illinois, Titusville, Florida, New York City, Ohio. And these aren't just struggling stores. These are century-old family businesses that survived the Great Depression, World War II, recessions, and every crisis you can imagine. But they can't survive what's happening right now in December 2025. Over 650 Harley dealerships still operate in the United States, but that number is plummeting fast, and the dealers who are hanging on are barely surviving. Today, I'm exposing the Harley dealership crisis that the company desperately doesn't want you to know about. Why dealers are closing at an alarming rate, why the dealers still open aren't making money, what caused this disaster, and what it means for Harley owners and the future of the brand. This is breaking news based on reports published in the last 48 hours, and it confirms everything I've been warning you about for months. If you own a Harley or you're thinking about buying one, you need to understand what's happening, because when your local dealer closes, you're left with a motorcycle and nowhere to get it serviced under warranty. Make sure you're subscribed, because this channel has been ahead of this story from the beginning. Hit that notification bell. Smash the like button if you want the truth instead of corporate spin. And let's expose the Harley dealer crisis. Let's start with the quote that nobody at Harley-Davidson wants customers to hear. George Gatto is a second-generation Harley dealership owner and chairperson of the NPDA's Harley-Davidson Dealer Council, which means he represents dealers across the country. This is what he told Revzilla magazine in a recent interview, and I'm quoting him directly. "I hate to admit it, but dealers are making too little on the sale of new bikes that are sold today. Margins on the bikes are the worst we've ever seen. They're not making any money." Let me repeat that. The head of the Harley Dealer Council just publicly admitted that Harley dealers are not making money selling new motorcycles. The margins are the worst they've ever seen in the history of Harley-Davidson dealerships. Think about what that means. Selling new motorcycles is supposed to be the core business of a motorcycle dealership. That's how they survive. That's how they pay rent, utilities, employee salaries, insurance, all their overhead costs. But according to the dealer's own representative, they're not making money on new bike sales anymore. So how are they supposed to stay in business? They can't. That's why they're closing, and it's happening everywhere. Let me give you specific examples of dealerships that have closed in just the last year or two. Miracle City Harley-Davidson in Titusville, Florida, closed permanently in September 2024. A century-old family-run Harley dealership in San Francisco that had been in business for over 100 years, closed in 2024, just 6 years after new management took over because they couldn't meet Harley corporate's expectations. A beloved Harley dealership in New York City that had been serving customers for nearly 3 decades closed after economic pressures forced them to offer discounts of up to 75% just to liquidate inventory in their final days. A dealership in Kewanee, Illinois shut down with no explanation. Multiple dealerships in Florida disappeared without any public statement about why they closed. In Ohio, dealerships have been closing, and in some cases, Harley Financial Services has been buying the properties for pennies on the dollar and converting them to experience centers instead of functional dealerships. These aren't isolated incidents. This is a pattern. This is a wave of closures sweeping across America, and the dealerships that are still open are struggling to survive. They're one bad quarter away from joining the closed list. The Harley dealer network is collapsing in real time, and Harley Corporate is doing almost nothing to stop it because they're too busy trying to save themselves. Now, let's talk about the numbers that explain why this is happening. Harley-Davidson's motorcycle shipments, meaning the number of bikes they've shipped to dealers over the last decade, have dropped 45%. 45% in 10 years. That's a catastrophic decline. If your business loses almost half its volume in a decade, you're in a death spiral. In the third quarter of 2025, which ended in September and results were reported in November, Harley's global motorcycle sales fell 6% compared to the same quarter in 2024. North American sales, which is primarily the United States, fell 5%. That doesn't sound as bad as 45% over 10 years, but remember, that's year-over-year decline on top of a decade of previous declines. The trend is accelerating, not improving. In Q2 2025, Harley's revenue from their motorcycle division dropped 23% year-over-year. Operating income margin for the motorcycle company fell from 14.7% in Q2 2024 to just 5.9% in Q2 2025. That's a collapse in profitability. And if Harley Corporate's margins are collapsing, imagine what's happening to dealer margins. For the full year 2024, Harley's consolidated operating income was down 47% compared to the prior year. In Q4 2024 specifically, global motorcycle shipments decreased 53% from a year earlier, 53% in one quarter. These are depression-level numbers. These are numbers that indicate a company in crisis. And yet Harley reported a profit of $377 million in Q3 2025, more than 3 times what they made in Q3 2024. How's that possible? How can Harley report record profits while sales are collapsing and dealers are closing? Because they're cutting costs, laying off employees, closing factories, reducing inventory, and most importantly, they sold off Harley-Davidson Financial Services for $1.25 billion. That one-time cash infusion made the balance sheet look better. But it doesn't change the underlying reality. Fewer motorcycles are being sold. Fewer customers want Harleys. And dealers can't survive on declining volumes at shrinking margins. Let's talk about what caused this crisis, because this didn't happen overnight. There are multiple factors, and they've all come together to create a perfect storm that's destroying the Harley dealer network. Factor number 1. The COVID pandemic boom and bust cycle. During COVID in 2020 and 2021, demand for motorcycles exploded. People were stuck at home. They had stimulus money, they wanted outdoor recreation activities, supply couldn't keep up with demand. Dealers had limited inventory, and they were selling every bike they got at full MSRP with no discounting. Some dealers were even getting above MSRP because customers were desperate. Dealers were printing money. They were making more profit than they'd made in decades. But that created a false sense of security. Dealers invested in facility upgrades, expanded their showrooms, hired more staff, took on debt to renovate and grow because they thought the boom would continue. Harley Corporate looked at those 2020-2021 sales numbers and projected that demand would stay high, so they ramped up production and kept shipping bikes to dealers. But then the boom ended. COVID restrictions lifted, stimulus money ran out, interest rates skyrocketed, and demand fell off a cliff. Suddenly, dealers who had expanded and taken on debt were stuck with massive inventory they couldn't sell, huge overhead costs they couldn't cover, and floor plan financing interest that was killing them every month bikes sat unsold. That takes me to factor number 2, floor plan financing. Most people don't understand how dealer financing works. When you see a new Harley sitting on a showroom floor, the dealer doesn't own that bike outright. They financed it through floor plan lending, which is essentially a line of credit where the dealer borrows money to stock inventory and pays interest every month until the bike sells. When interest rates were low, floor plan financing was cheap, maybe 3 to 5%. But when the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates aggressively in 2022, 2023, and 2024 to fight inflation, floor plan rates skyrocketed to 8, 10, 12% or more. Now dealers are paying huge monthly interest charges on bikes sitting unsold on their floors. A $30,000 Road Glide sitting in inventory for 6 months at 10% floor plan interest is costing the dealer $1,500 just in financing charges, and that comes straight out of their already shrinking profit margin. Many dealers are underwater on their inventory. They owe more in floor plan debt than the bikes are worth because values are dropping. That's an impossible situation. Factor number 3. Harley Corporate forcing dealers to take inventory they don't want. Multiple sources, including dealers who've spoken anonymously, have confirmed that Harley Corporate pressures dealers to accept inventory shipments even when dealers don't want more bikes. There are quotas and allocation systems. If a dealer refuses to take inventory that Harley wants to ship, they get penalized with reduced allocation of popular models, reduced co-op advertising support, and other consequences. I mentioned this earlier, but it's worth repeating. One dealer named Marcus, referenced in a YouTube video analyzing this crisis, said he was forced to take 31 bikes in March, 28 more in April, and 19 more in May that he didn't want and couldn't sell, and when he finally said enough and tried to refuse, Harley threatened consequences. He eventually closed his dealership. That's not an isolated story. That's standard practice. Harley manufactures bikes, ships them to dealers, counts them as sales in their financial reports, and leaves dealers holding inventory they can't move. It's a shell game that makes Harley's numbers look better, while dealers drown in unsold bikes and floor plan debt. Factor number 4, Harley's push into e-commerce and direct sales is undercutting dealers. Harley has been building out their online sales platforms and factory direct channels, which means they're competing with their own dealers. Why would a customer go to a local dealer and negotiate when they can configure a bike online, get factory pricing, and have it delivered? Dealers are seeing their customer base eroded by the very company they're supposed to be partnering with. Every direct sale Harley makes is a sale the dealer loses. But the dealer still has to pay for the showroom, the staff, the inventory, and the overhead to support the brand. It's a no-win situation. Factor number 5, and this is the big one, there's just not enough demand. The baby boomer generation that drove Harley sales for 40 years is aging out. They're in their 70s and 80s now. They're not buying new bikes. Many of them are dying. And Harley has completely failed to attract younger riders. Millennials and Gen Z don't want Harleys. They think they're expensive, heavy, old-fashioned, and irrelevant. When young people do buy motorcycles, they're buying adventure bikes, sport bikes, smaller retro bikes from Triumph or Royal Enfield, or Japanese cruisers. Harley's core demographic is disappearing, and there's no one replacing them. How is a dealer supposed to stay in business when the customer base is literally dying and shrinking every year? They can't. The fundamental demand dynamics are broken, and no amount of marketing or discounting can fix it. You can't force people to want a product they don't want, and younger Americans do not want Harleys. Factor number 6. Operational costs have skyrocketed for dealers. During the boom years, dealers built or renovated expensive facilities with high ceilings, beautiful showrooms, fancy lounges, state-of-the-art service bays. Harley Corporate encouraged and even required facility upgrades as part of franchise agreements. Those facilities are expensive to operate. Heating and cooling costs for a 20,000 square foot showroom are massive. Property taxes and insurance have gone up. Employee wages have increased, utilities, maintenance, everything costs more in 2025 than it did in 2015. But sales are down 45%. Dealers have half the revenue with the same or higher fixed costs. The math doesn't work. Many dealers are losing money every month they stay open. Now let's talk about what Harley Corporate is doing about this crisis. The answer is not much. Harley's new CEO, Artie Starrs, who took over in October 2025, acknowledged the brand's struggles in the Q3 earnings call, but his solutions are weak. He's talking about reducing regulations and bureaucracy within the company, streamlining operations, focusing on profitability over volume. Those are fine corporate buzzwords, but they do nothing to help dealers who are closing right now. Harley hasn't offered financial relief to struggling dealers. They haven't reduced wholesale prices so dealers can have better margins. They haven't stopped forcing unwanted inventory on dealers. They haven't slowed down their direct-to-consumer e-commerce push that undercuts dealers. They're letting dealers fail because, from Harley Corporate's perspective, consolidating the dealer network into fewer, larger operations actually makes sense financially. Fewer dealers means less competition for customers, which means the surviving dealers can maintain pricing better. It means lower costs for Harley supporting fewer locations. It means they can buy up closed dealership properties cheap and convert them to experience centers or company-owned stores. This is not an accident. This is a strategy. Harley is deliberately allowing the weak dealers to fail so they can consolidate control. The problem is, when you let 30 or 40% of your dealer network close, you're also abandoning huge portions of the country where customers will no longer have local service or sales support. And those customers will stop buying Harleys because they know if something goes wrong, there's no dealer within 100 miles to fix it. It's short-term thinking that will accelerate the brand's long-term decline. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening right now at a typical struggling Harley dealership. The owner comes in every morning and looks at 40 motorcycles sitting on the showroom floor and in the back lot. Those 40 bikes represent $800,000 to $1 million in floor plan debt that's accruing interest at 10%, costing $7,000 to $8,000 per month. Last month, the dealership sold 3 bikes. 3. Total revenue from those 3 sales was maybe $75,000. Gross profit after paying off the floor plan and accounting for wholesale costs was maybe $4,000 to $6,000 total. That doesn't even cover the rent, which is $15,000 per month for the facility. It doesn't cover payroll for 6 employees, another $35,000 per month. It doesn't cover utilities, insurance, property taxes, maintenance, advertising. The dealership is losing $50,000 to $60,000 per month. The owner is draining their savings. They've maxed out credit lines. They're behind on payments. And every week, Harley Corporate is calling asking when they're going to take the next shipment of bikes. It's unsustainable. The owner starts looking at the options. They can keep losing money until they're completely bankrupt and lose everything. Or they can close now, negotiate with floor plan lenders, liquidate inventory at a loss, and try to salvage something. Most are choosing to close. It's the rational decision. But it's heartbreaking for these owners who've spent decades building their businesses and serving their communities. They're not failing because they're bad business people. They're failing because Harley-Davidson's business model's broken and the company isn't doing anything to fix it. Now, let's talk about what this means for you if you own a Harley or you're thinking about buying one. First, if your local dealer closes, you lose convenient access to warranty service, parts, and expertise. Sure, you can drive to a dealer 2 hours away, but are you really going to do that every time you need an oil change or a recall repair? Most people won't, which means Harley ownership becomes significantly less convenient. Second, your bike's resale value is going to take a hit. When dealerships close in an area, there's less local demand for used Harleys because potential buyers know there's no nearby dealer for service. Supply exceeds demand and prices drop. Third, the parts and accessories ecosystem starts to break down. Independent shops can order Harley parts, but they don't stock the breadth of inventory a dealer does. You'll wait longer for parts. Repairs take longer. It's more hassle. Fourth, the community aspect dies. Harley dealerships are gathering places for riders. They host events, rides, bike nights. When the dealer closes, that community dissolves. People stop riding as much. The culture fades. Fifth, and this is critical, when Harley dealerships close at this rate, it signals to the market that the brand is dying. And once that perception sets in, it becomes self-fulfilling. People don't want to buy motorcycles from a dying brand. They worry about parts availability, resale value, and whether the company will even exist in 10 years. So they buy something else, which causes more sales decline, which causes more dealer closures. It's a death spiral. And Harley is in it right now. Here's what I think is going to happen over the next 2 to 3 years. The dealer closures are going to accelerate. Right now, there are about 650 Harley dealerships in the United States. I predict that number will be below 500 by the end of 2026 and below 400 by the end of 2027. That's a 40% reduction in the dealer network in just 2 years. The dealers that survive will be the largest operations in major metropolitan areas who can survive on volume and who have diversified revenue streams including service, parts, apparel, and other brands. Small town and rural Harley dealers are going to disappear almost completely. When that happens, Harley's U.S. market presence will be concentrated in maybe 30 major cities, and the rest of the country will be dealer deserts. Harley will try to compensate with mobile service vans, mail-order parts, and e-commerce, but it won't be the same. The brand will lose its grassroots connection to customers. Meanwhile, Indian Motorcycle, which is Harley's main American competitor, is expanding their dealer network and gaining market share. Every Harley dealer that closes is an opportunity for Indian to pick up those customers. Japanese brands like Honda, Yamaha, and Kawasaki aren't closing dealers. They're stable or growing. European brands like BMW, Triumph, and Ducati are doing fine. It's only Harley that's in crisis. And that tells you this isn't an industry problem. This is a Harley-Davidson problem caused by decades of mismanagement, failure to innovate, failure to attract younger customers, and arrogance. Let me address the argument that some Harley defenders will make. They'll say, this is just creative destruction. The market is consolidating into fewer, more efficient dealers. This is normal and healthy. Wrong. There's nothing healthy about losing 40% of your dealer network in 2 years. There's nothing normal about dealers publicly stating they're not making money. There's nothing efficient about alienating customers in huge geographic regions. This is a crisis, pure and simple. And it's a crisis that Harley created through bad decisions and refusal to adapt. They could have invested in electric motorcycles 10 years ago when the writing was on the wall. They didn't. They could have developed affordable small displacement bikes to attract young riders. They didn't. They could have modernized their product line to compete with adventure bikes and other growing segments. They didn't. They could have treated their dealers as true partners instead of inventory dumping grounds. They didn't. Every major decision Harley has made in the last 15 years has been wrong. And now, dealers are paying the price. And customers are going to pay the price when they can't get their bike serviced. Here's my advice. If you own a Harley and your local dealer is still open, establish a relationship with an independent motorcycle shop now before your dealer closes. Find a mechanic who knows Harleys and can work on your bike. Stock up on common maintenance parts like oil filters, spark plugs, brake pads. Don't assume your dealer will be there in 6 months or a year. If you're thinking about buying a Harley, seriously reconsider. Think about whether you want to own a motorcycle from a brand in this much trouble. Think about resale value. Think about parts availability. Think about whether Harley-Davidson will even exist as an independent company in 5 years, or whether they'll be acquired by a foreign conglomerate or go bankrupt. There are so many better options. Indian makes better bikes at similar or lower prices. Japanese cruisers are more reliable and cheaper. If you want American-made, Indian is American-made. If you want performance, buy a sport bike. If you want adventure capability, buy an adventure bike. There's no rational reason to buy a Harley-Davidson in December 2025 unless you're sentimentally attached to the brand. And sentiment doesn't keep dealerships open. It doesn't guarantee parts availability. It doesn't protect your investment. The Harley dealer crisis is real. It's happening right now, and it's going to get much worse before it gets better. George Gatto, the head of the Harley Dealer Council, said margins are the worst they've ever seen, and dealers aren't making money. That's not a biased critic. That's the dealer's own representative admitting the situation is unsustainable. When 45% of your volume disappears in 10 years and your dealer network is collapsing, you're not in a temporary slump. You're in a terminal decline. And unless Harley-Davidson makes dramatic changes quickly, the brand is not going to survive this decade. I've been saying this for months, and every piece of news confirms it. The Q3 2025 results, the dealer closures, the sales declines, the admission from dealers that they're not making money, it's all pointing in the same direction. Harley-Davidson is dying. And when Harley dies, those 650 dealers still open today will be lucky if 300 survive. What do you think? Is your local Harley dealer struggling? Have you noticed dealerships closing in your area? Are you worried about owning a Harley when the dealer network collapses? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's have a real conversation about what's happening. Subscribe to this channel for honest industry analysis that tells you the truth instead of corporate propaganda. Hit that like button if you appreciate journalism that holds brands accountable. Share this video with every Harley owner you know because they need to understand what's coming. Thanks for watching. Stay informed. And remember, when the dealers close, you're stuck with a bike and nowhere to fix it. Plan accordingly.